You're listening to the Inside the Mix podcast with your host, Mark Matthews.
Hello folks, and welcome to the Inside the Mix podcast. If you are a new listener, make sure you hit follow wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe and that notification bell. And to the returning listeners, a big welcome back. In the middle of July 2024, I dropped my limited series podcast, Logic Pro Mixing Tips for Synthpop producers, artists, and musicians. And if you go to synthmusicmastering.com, there's also the video version of it as well. So not only can you listen to the entire 15-part course for free, you can also watch the entire 15-part course for free. And you can also download all of the assets. So that's the stems or tracks. That is also the project file, the complete project file, and also my Synthpop Logic Pro mixing template. You'll find a link to download all those assets in the episode description, and you will also find a link to the 15-part video course and the limited series podcast as well. And it's approximately 6 hours long, but it is broken down into 15 videos. So this episode of the Inside the Mix podcast is going to be the most popular episode of my Logic Pro mixing tips for synthpop producers, artists, and musicians podcast. And it's episode 15, Final Mix Touches, Finishing and Polishing a Synth Pop Track. So, without further ado, let's dive into episode 15 of my limited series podcast. So here we are in the Logic Pro session for this limited series podcast. And I say this every episode, but make sure you download the project, the stems, and the Logic Pro template. Click the link in the episode description. It is all free, folks. And you can find the video there as well if you are listening to this on your podcast player of choice. You can watch the video on my website and follow along there and get an actual visual cue of what we're going through. So here, what we're going to do in this final episode is we're going to do some mix bus processing just to finish this mix. And we're going to start with some compression. And I'm going to use my favorite vintage opto compressor. So I've got a cycle region set in a loud part of this mix. And I've got the vintage opto compressor here. And I've got a 1.5 to 1 ratio, really subtle, minimal gain reduction going on here. My threshold is set to minus 42. I've got the auto gain off. I've got the auto release on, and I've got a very slow attack. I want to let those transients through. Basically, what I want to do here is just help bind things together and add a bit of tone with the opto compressor and just bring up that lower level information just a touch. I'm just tickling the meter on this particular compressor. And I've got the makeup gain of 2 dB and the output gain set to -1 because I want the actual level of the mix itself to be the same as it was before it went into the compressor. So I'm going to play it now without the compressor. Now I'm going to play it with the compressor. Okay, very subtle, but again, just binding, just gluing things together at this particular point of the mix. Again, 1.5 to 1 ratio. Could go to 2 to 1, but inevitably with this sort of situation, I like to go with a very low ratio. And in this instance, I've opted for 1.5 to 1. Now, there is a disclaimer with this, folks. If I was sending this off to a mastering engineer, I wouldn't have a compressor on the mix bus. But for this podcast and this series, I've put a compressor on there. General rule of thumb, if you are sending a mix for mastering, leave the mix bus empty. But in this instance, I've put it on there for this particular tutorial. So the final part of this mix bus puzzle is this. I've got the console EQ. It was the tube EQ before, but I've switched it for the console EQ as I prefer it in this instance. It just sounds better to me. And I've got this enhanced mix patch here, and I've tailored it slightly to my liking for this mix because it was quite aggressive in terms of its boost. So I've got a high gain of 1.4. It's like a high shelf. And then I've got a mid gain, so it's a bell curve in this instance at 3 kilohertz, which is sort of where that vocal presence frequency is. And then I've got the drive set at 7, and I've got the output model of smooth console EQ, and I've got a -2 dB on the actual output to compensate for that increased signal level. And this is what it sounds like before the vintage console EQ applied. And this is with the vintage console EQ. I think it sounds really nice. Going with the output model here, it sounds nice and smooth, I think. I did actually forget to mention that there is a 1 dB boost at 110 Hertz for some bass frequencies there as well. But I really like the vintage console EQ in this instance, and the tube EQ sounds great as well. The EQs and Logic are really, really good. So that's it, folks. That is the mixing process done for this project. Now, again, I'm just going to reiterate that previous disclaimer here with the mix bus. If I was sending this to a mastering engineer, I would leave the mix bus empty. That being said, you could leave the console EQ on there if you wanted to for some color, but in general, I would leave it empty and leave that to your mastering engineer to take care of, because once that's printed on there, they then have to correct it if they do need to. So just leave it for the mastering engineer effectively, folks. Leave the mix bus empty. Let's check a few parameters for this mix. First things first, I'm going to check the phase correlation in this chorus section here where it's most busy. Okay, it sounds really good. There's no issues there with phase. So let's go to the first verse and play a bit here. Used to be like day and night. I could watch you forever, but I'm done. You know, one thing I'm going to do, folks, I said it was finished. I'm just going to boost the reverb on that snare because I think it just sounds a bit too dry. So I'm going to boost it by a few dB. And also the phase was fine for this section here, but I'm going to play it again. Used to be like day and night. I could watch you forever, but I'm done with you by your little light. Yeah, your secret show. So I settled on about minus 15.7. I think I might just even it out and just go minus 16, to be honest. We'll go minus 16 with that reverb send on that snare. I think that sounds quite good. It just sounded a bit too dry for my liking then. And in particular, another thing I'm going to check is I'm going to put it in mono. And what I'm checking for in mono is, can I hear everything that I want to hear? Is everything standing out as it should? Is anything being masked? In particular, the vocal. So I'm going to put it in mono and we'll play the verse first. Used to be like day and night. I could watch you forever, but I'm done with you by your little light. Yeah, your secret show. I think in this instance, I might just bring the bass up a touch. So I'm going to send it to minus 2 dB and let's play the same part. Used to be like day and night. I could watch you forever, but I'm done with you by your little light. Yeah, your secret show. That sounded good. It sounds better there. Let's play the chorus. I'm going to play the final chorus. I think those arps might need to come down a touch. So let's find out where they are. I'm just going to play it again. I brought them down to minus 3 dB. So I think that sounds pretty good now. So I'm going to take it out of mono and let's play it. Yeah, that sounds much better. I say much better. It sounded good anyway, but it sounds better. So the final thing I'm going to check for is the overall signal level for this mix. And this is sort of the loudest section here. And it looks like it's at about minus 6 dB, which is perfect, right, for sending this out. Got plenty of headroom here for the mastering engineer. So I'm going to turn on the multimeter and let's have a look and see where we are in terms of LUFS. Short-term LUFS about -19, and we're peaking at about -6.1. So plenty of room to send this, or rather plenty of room for the mastering and engineer to do their magic. So really, really happy with the final signal level, the overall level for this mix. So now is the most satisfying part of the mixing process. I'm going to play the track at the point of import. So this is verse 2 into chorus 2.
You forever, but until you find your little light, yeah, your secret show. I could watch you forever, but until you find your little light, your secret show. One day I will let you go, let you go. Right now you don't need to know. Right now you don't need to know, darling. One day I will.
And this is the final mix. So this is verse 2, chorus 2.
We used to be like day and night. I could watch you forever, but until you find your little light, yeah, your secret show. I could watch you forever, but until you find your little light, your secret show. One day I will let you go, let you go. Right now you don't need to know. Right now you don't need to know, darling.
So hopefully, folks, you can hear there is a marked improvement from the import to where we are now at the end of the mixing process. So what we've been through here, we've been through the mixing of the drum subgroup, the bass subgroup, the two synth subgroups, the effects subgroup, and the lead vocal and the harmony vocal subgroups, not necessarily in that order. And it sounds much better. Now, this is using just Logic Pro plugins and really is the basic foundations of mixing. There's lots more that we could do with this in terms of processing, in particular, automation. I would heavily automate a song, in particular with vocals, and just moving things around in the stereo field to add excitement and interest. But that's another series in itself. There we go, folks. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you would like to consume the whole thing, remember there is a link in the episode description for both the actual podcast itself, Logic Pro mixing tips for synthpop producers, artists, and musicians, and also a link to the video course over at synthmusicmastering.com. And there's a link to download all of the assets as well. So that's the completed project file, that is the Logic Pro synthpop mixing template, and the assets as well. So that's the tracks for this particular track that was used. So folks, click on the links in the episode description, download all the free assets, watch and listen to the podcast itself, and start knocking out some amazing mixes.